What's up, guys? Just wanted to share this funny deck I made here in Master Duel. If you're a normal person, your first response when you look at this is probably something along the lines of, what a mess, what could this possibly do? So before I talk about how the deck actually functions, I'd like to give just a little bit of context. This is a deck I made primarily for the purpose of making my friend laugh while we screwed around on ladder. But it turns out that it's actually a lot better than I expected it to be. We, over the course of a couple hours, were able to rank up from Platinum 4 to Diamond 4 with like a 70% win rate or something, which doesn't exactly make this like, you know, the next meta threat by any means. But it's way, way better than I thought it would ever be, to the point where I think it's actually worth playing if you're in the lower ranks and looking to have some fun. So something funny will happen almost every duel when you play this deck. If you don't mind playing something that's obviously like suboptimal, not like a tiered deck, this is a great way to have some fun. So with that out of the way, let's talk about what this deck actually does. And it actually does a lot of different things. So that's not a super easy thing to put in a nutshell. We're at the point in Master Duel now where there are a lot of very strong engines which can generate you a ton of card advantage and don't have any sort of locks or restrictions on them. And now with the release of the Fiendsmith cards, which is just yet another little engine that fits that category, you have this card, Fiendsmith Tract, which lets you add any light fiend from your deck to your hand. And it just so happens that this card, Tierra, the Source of Destruction, this card is a light fiend, and it's also a very funny card. If you're not familiar with it, because it is pretty old, we'll just give it a quick read here. You have to special summon it from your hand by having 10 other differently named cards among your field and in your hand. It can't be negated when you special it. And then on summon, it has another effect, which nothing can be activated in response to. It shuffles back everything into the deck, except for itself, from both players' hands, field, and graveyard. And the face-up pendulum monsters for a good measure. It resets everything except the banish pile. So if you do this going first, your opponent just gets put down to one card, which is hilarious if you ask me. Part of the problem of why this deck isn't like an exceptionally good deck, of course, is because there are so many great decks out there in the modern meta that have really good one-card starters and can find those cards pretty easily. So if your opponent just top decks something like, say, Kashtira Unicorn, for example, there's a pretty good chance you actually lose even after resolving Tierra. But it is hilarious. So I mostly built the deck with this card in mind, but there are plenty of other things you can do besides just summoning Tierra. But this was the main idea. So to facilitate that, we just have as many different little engines as possible that generate pluses for us. To get started here, we've got the little Terratop Takatomborg engine. This one's pretty small and pretty simple. It's just a +1, and you get some free bodies. You can go into various plays from there. One of the most beneficial ones in terms of card advantage is you can overlay them for Chariot Carry. This is going to be the way that we primarily access our little Gold Pride engine. Chariot Carry can detach a card to add a Gold Pride spell, so you can add Better Luck next time. When you activate this card, you get to add Captain Carry, and you'll pay some life points as well, so that will activate her summon condition. You can special her from the hand, and she will get you the trap card here, start your engines. So that's a way we can get a lot of pluses. Then we can overlay on top of Chariot Carry with Xyz's Armor Fortress. There'll be 2 materials, so you can add the full armored Xyz's trap and the armored Xyz's spell. So you can see just from Terratop, we can actually get a huge amount of pluses. And this is just a really good way to be able to start the turn. Especially once you start going into the Gold Pride cards too, your opponent's often going to be pretty confused. They're not really going to understand what's going on, so they might waste interactions. on some of these cards before they really understand what's happening. And then you can pivot into some of your other engines, right? So we also have the Millennium guys here. It's a pretty small package here. We've got the Sengenjin, who can search Golem. Golem can search Weju Temple. Weju Temple puts one of your monsters in hand into the back row and then adds the Millennium Shield, which can itself add the Ankh. Another way to get a lot of pluses. We don't really mind paying the life points. So we don't really care about the fact that we don't have reliable access to Ankh. We don't even play the Exodia. This is just another free card that we can add off of the Millennium Shield. Also worth noting that Sengenjin is an 8. That's relevant for some of the other plays we have access to. And Golem being a 6 is also useful for some of the synchro plays that I'll talk about later. We've got the Punk cards, of course. There's a lot of ways to access this engine. Of course, you can normal summon Zeamin, but we don't really want to use our normal summon on her. We're going to talk about the normal summon of the deck later. You can just use E-Telly to get Zeamin out, or we're actually playing 3 Foxy Tune, because this is another way to access your Punk cards without the normal summon. Punks, of course, get you a ton of pluses. You just do the very standard line if you're not familiar real quick. Usually it goes Zeamin, add Foxy Tune. Foxy Tune you discard for Sharakusai. He's going to fuse into Rising Carp, which can then tribute itself to summon from deck Wagon, he'll add the field spell, and Deer Note. You sync those two into Dragon Drive. Dragon Drive will pay some life points to add Madam Spider. You'll draw off the field spell. Then you can use the other field spell effect to summon the Madam Spider from hand. She adds the trap, and you get the second draw off the field spell. Another engine that just gives you an enormous number of pluses, and importantly, the field spell draws you random cards from the deck. So that's going to be the way that we access some of our more important cards that we can't search. Since a lot of these cards are just random things we get to add, you can go through a bunch of these engines and add a lot of cards before you start using the draw effects, like with Jam Session here, and that'll help you find the key cards that can't be searched. Some of those key cards, of course, are involved in the Fiendsmith engine. In particular, of course, we're playing 3 Tract, which is not typical of the Fiendsmith engine, but we want it because it lets us search Tierra. And, you know, we could just play like extra copies of Tierra, but Tract is a lot more useful to draw than Tierra if we don't have the ability to summon this. So we just max out on Tract. But other than that, it's a normal Fiendsmith engine. Two of the Fiendsmith himself, and then the Requiem sequence and the 2 fusions in the extra deck. We also have, of course, the Wave High King Caesar, which is a relevant card to make if you're not doing the Tierra thing. Just a good, powerful, disruptive effect. Or you can do the Desiree instead to have a negate. So the last card then to mention here is this guy, Overdrive Teleporter. This card is ridiculous. This is what we're trying to normal summon, because you'll see he can't be special summoned. He only requires 1 tribute, and with all of the different cards we have that we can freely put onto the board in this deck without normal summoning, it's actually not very difficult to tribute this guy out. And if you can resolve this card, it's absolutely insane. I think it's like a +7 at maximum just from resolving 1 Overdrive Teleporter. You pay 2,000, special summon 2 level 3 psychics from the deck. They're not negated. There's no kind of lock or anything like that. He doesn't have to tribute himself. He sticks around. So what you're normally doing off of this guy is you're getting one of your Punk cards, like Zeamin, although this might change depending on what's in your hand. And then for the other card, you can get... Where is he? You can get Libromancer Geek Boy. This guy, he's actually a psychic level 3. And he'll add on summon Origin Story. Origin Story can add, well, it places it on the field, actually. It sets it. You can get this card, Libromancer Realized. This is just like a random card to have. It doesn't actually do much of anything. Originally, I was playing the field spell, because the field spell on activation adds a Libromancer monster. But the problem is that this deck already plays 2 field spells that you're going to find pretty often, in particular Jam Session. You'll very frequently have Jam Session. So it doesn't matter if you're getting to add a card with the Libromancer field spell if you have to give up the Jam Session to do that. So in most cases, this is actually just as much of a plus as the field spell would be. And it lets us play one less brick in deck. We don't have to play the ritual target for the field spell. That's a bit of a garnet otherwise. And also the field spell's a UR, so you can save a little dust. On that topic, by the way, Tierra is actually a legacy pack card. You see it can't be dismantled, so there's a good chance you already have one of these just kicking around in your collection. And we also do have one other target here, which is Dr. Frankenderp. And this guy just pays 500. You look at the top card, you either draw it and skip your next draw phase, or just leave it there. So this is pretty good if you've already accessed the Punk engine. You just grab this guy in Geek Boy. Just more potential pluses. Just having one extra card can absolutely make the difference between a live Tierra or not. So that's all the main deck engines primarily. What you're actually doing with those when you go into the extra deck, besides the Punk line and the Fiendsmith stuff, we've got a few other interesting cards here. Psychic End Punisher is a really good alternate win condition if you don't want to do the Tierra, or if you have like an easy lethal line. This deck pays a lot of life points, between 2,000 potentially for each of the Millennium guys, between all of the life points we pay with Punk, 500 for Frankenderp. We're paying 2,000 for Overdrive Teleporter, so you can make some absolutely enormous Psychic End Punishers, and it can be very difficult for the opponent to out as well, even going first. You also have this guy, Crocodragon. He gains 500 for each card in your hand, so he can also become really, really huge. You can also make him pretty easily when you're trying to actually do like the Tierra play, because you've got a variety of 6s, right? You've got Overdrive Teleporter, you've got Golem, you've got your Fiendsmiths, and you also have a bunch of level 3 tuners, of course, all the Punks. So it's pretty easy to make Ravenous Crocodragon draw a card. Another good way, just like the Punk Field spell, to dig for some of your unsearchable cards. You can also sometimes draw 2 cards with him if you do something like, Geek Boy plus Captain Carry plus a Punk tuner. We also have this guy, Armor Torpedo. Ideally, you're putting Armor Fortress on top of Chariot Carry, right? But if you don't have access to Chariot Carry, or you already drew, you just hard draw Captain Carry, you hard draw Better Luck next time, and so you don't want to go into her, then you can make Armor Torpedo instead as a rank 3. He'll draw you a card when he detaches 2, another good way to dig. And then you can slap the Armor Fortress on top of him and still add 1 of the Armored Xyz cards. We also play Coach King Giant Trainer. So the way you would make this one usually is that if you have access to Sengenjin and your Punk engine, Sengenjin's an 8, you make Dragon Drive, who's an 8, and when the Deer Note hits the graveyard and you get to revive a card, you can choose to revive Risencarp, who's your third 8, and so you overlay those guys, you get Giant Trainer. One thing that you don't normally have to think about when you're playing normal Yu-Gi-Oh! But is relevant in this deck is, obviously, going into the extra deck is usually just purely beneficial for you. The cards on field that you're using to make your extra deck monsters aren't often all that great on their own. But anytime you do something like, if I overlay 2 cards to make Chariot Carry, I have 1 less card between the things on my hand and in my field, or in my hand and on my field for Tierra, right? So if we're trying to actually resolve Tierra, you got to think about the math of how many cards am I putting into this thing and how many cards does it give me. As crazy as Giant Trainer is, you draw 3 cards. Remember that it takes 3 cards to go into him, right? So you're turning 3 cards on field into 1, and then you're drawing 3, so it's actually only a net of 1 extra card. But, that's still plus, and it does let you dig more to help you find stuff like your Tract. So he doesn't come up super often, and he's not actually as crazy as you might think, but still pretty good. We've got a Zeus. This is not super necessary, to be honest. There's kind of 1, maybe 2 flex spots in the deck, in the extra deck, that is. So, instead of Zeus, if you wanted to, you could play the full armored Lancer, whatever his name is, the actual boss guy of the Armored Xyz cards, if you actually wanted to summon him and use the trap to steal monsters and stuff. The other card I would say you could probably cut is Desiree. This card's not actually super important, honestly. So these 2 cards you could kind of replace. You could play things like, the Punk Amazing Dragon if you wanted to. You could play just like a random good staple like SP or something. These are the two I went with. And then the rest is the Fiendsmith stuff here. So that's the deck essentially. You kind of just get to make stuff up with this deck as you go. You'll find funny ways to access your various different engines to keep putting bodies on board. One of the actual major win conditions of this deck is that you've just been comboing for too long and your opponent gets bored and quits. We won quite a few duels doing that. Going second hilariously as well, I'd like to point out, if you max C the opponent and it resolves, you can just use Tierra to like break their board. We did this against a Cash Tierra player when we were playing this deck the other day. It was really funny. Yeah, that's all there is to it really. Just generate advantage and summon Tierra, or just go into the extra deck for generic good stuff. It's really, really funny. I had a blast playing this, and it's not actually too expensive either, especially if you already were trying to pull for like Fiendsmith. Maybe you have some extra tracts, right? Maybe you got your Sengenjin. So try it out if you want to have some fun. I've been really enjoying it, and the win rate, again, has been far better than I could have ever imagined, even if it's obviously nothing like a meta deck. So hopefully, if any of you guys do try this out, you'll enjoy it too. Leave some comments and tell me what you think of the deck, and I'll catch y'all later.